this government has to be very careful now that it doesn't drive more and more people to hate Israel.
So Piers Morgan just dropped a bombshell about Israel losing American support, and he's absolutely right. We're witnessing a historic collapse in U.S.-Israel relations that could reshape Middle East policy for decades. With Trump now back in office and polling showing 60% of Americans view Israel unfavorably, this analysis is crucial.
It may come as a shock to viewers in the many places where the Iran war is deeply unpopular, but some communities in Israel staged a protest this weekend against the ceasefire in Lebanon. Israel sees its war on Hezbollah as inseparable from the Iran war. Most Israelis support it. And there's every chance that Netanyahu will suffer big political consequences if Trump decrees an early end to the war that Netanyahu persuaded him to start. In any case, the state of Israel could be living with the consequences of Netanyahu's decisions for many years to come. Many formerly reliable allies of Israel eventually condemned the war in Gaza and moved to recognise a Palestinian state. Well, today the Spanish government will formally ask the entire European Union to sever its ties with Israel over its violations of international law. And here in the United States, where it matters most, support for Israel is cratering. The days of unanimous bipartisan support are done.
This Trump-Netanyahu dynamic is fascinating because Netanyahu gambled everything on Trump's support. But Trump just forced a Lebanon ceasefire against Israeli wishes. Meanwhile, Spain's EU proposal represents the most serious European diplomatic challenge to Israel since 1948. The old guardrails are completely gone.
Well, every candidate to succeed Donald Trump as president, whether Democrat or Republican, will now have to take a position on this profound change in public opinion. Democratic presidential hopeful Rahm Emanuel, who's Jewish, is calling for the U.S. to end preferential treatment for Israel altogether.
Emanuel's position is seismic. This isn't some progressive activist. He's Obama's former chief of staff, Clinton's senior advisor, and current ambassador to Japan. When establishment Democrats like Emanuel call for ending Israeli exceptionalism, it signals the party's center has fundamentally shifted on this issue.
Well, all of this amounts to an extraordinary, unprecedented shift in a country where presidential candidates traditionally rank their support for Israel on a scale of 9 to 10. Whether Israel can do anything to remedy this is unclear. What is clear is that photos of the IDF attacking icons of Jesus with a sledgehammer are unlikely to resolve the situation.
Exactly right about the religious imagery damage. For decades, Israel relied on evangelical Christian support. 80 million Americans who see Israel through biblical prophecy. Images of IDF soldiers destroying Christian icons shatter that coalition faster than any policy debate ever could. It's political suicide.
Jonathan Conricus, let's just start, if we may, with this appalling image of an IDF soldier in southern Lebanon attacking and destroying an icon of Jesus Christ with a sledgehammer. And this has now been confirmed by Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu said today, I was stunned and saddened to learn that an IDF soldier damaged a Catholic religious icon in southern Lebanon. I condemn the act in the strongest terms. We express regret for the incident and for any hurt this has caused to believers in Lebanon and around the world.
Netanyahu's instant condemnation shows how catastrophic this image is. Christian Zionists provide Israel's most reliable American support base, donating hundreds of millions annually. When Texas megachurch pastors start questioning Israel's righteousness, Netanyahu knows he's lost the narrative completely.
But they're now looking at this and thinking, why are we supporting this attack on Iran with Israel if the IDF in Lebanon are desecrating icons of Jesus Christ? What would you say to them?
This connects directly to Trump's ceasefire decision. He's watching these polls too. 60% unfavorable means supporting Israel militarily could cost him politically. Trump prioritizes his own approval ratings above everything else, including Netanyahu's war plans.
One described serving in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza in December 2023 when a platoon noticed suspicious figures and fired. He said, when we got to a destination, I realized these weren't terrorists. It was an old guy and 3 boys, maybe teenagers. Not one of them was armed, but their bodies were riddled with bullets. Then the battalion commander came over with his people, and one spat on the bodies and yelled, "This is what happens to anybody who messes with Israel, you sons of bitches." Another soldier described a shooting at an army outpost in southern Gaza. She said, suddenly the soldiers on watch noticed 5 Palestinians crossing the line they weren't allowed to cross, heading for northern Gaza. The battalion commander gave an order to overwhelm them with fire, even though they hadn't been confirmed as armed or anything like that. A tank started shooting at them with its machine gun, hundreds of bullets. 4 of the 5 Palestinians were killed. A few hours later, a bulldozer buried them in the sand. The article also describes a sniper who shot people seeking aid and drone operators who killed civilians. And there was a lot more very, very shocking detail in this investigation.
The key detail here is these testimonies come from Israeli soldiers themselves, published in Haaretz, Israel's most respected newspaper. This isn't Hamas propaganda or UN reports Netanyahu can dismiss. When Israeli veterans describe systematic war crimes, it's impossible to deny.
But the combination of that appalling image of this IDF soldier desecrating a statue of Jesus with this report in your publication, it certainly is testing extremely hard, I would argue, this constant refrain we hear that the IDF is the most moral army in the world.
The most moral army narrative was Israel's primary defense for decades against international criticism. These soldier testimonies completely obliterate that claim. How do you maintain moral superiority when your own troops admit to executing unarmed civilians and desecrating religious sites?
He's a very high-profile American Jew, basically saying it's time for America to stop treating Israel as an exceptional country that is worthy of our billions of dollars of support. They should be treated the same as everybody else. And that comes with the backdrop of this Pew Research Center survey showing that more than 60% of Americans now view Israel unfavorably, up from 53% only last year. Now,
that 10-point jump to 60% unfavorable in just 1 year is unprecedented. Emmanuel's position gives political cover to every Democrat who wants to distance from Israel, but feared being labeled anti-Semitic. He's essentially given them permission to abandon unconditional support.
So, as somebody like me who loves Israel as a country, loves Israeli people, has many, many Jewish friends around the world, from LA to Sydney to London, and has become increasingly critical myself of the Israeli government, this one, and how it's been behaving. And critical of many of the actions of the IDF at the behest of this government. I share this sentiment, which is Israel, this government has to be very careful now that it doesn't drive more and more people to hate Israel, which is clearly what is happening.
This distinction is crucial. Criticizing Israeli government actions isn't anti-Semitism, it's basic democratic accountability. Netanyahu deliberately conflates the two to shield himself from legitimate criticism, but that strategy is backfiring as Americans see through the manipulation.
But what I would say to that, Ishai, is that, I remember in the Iraq War, one of the most devastating images that came out of that war was the Abu Ghraib image of American troops abusing Iraqi civilians. And it shocked America, profoundly shocked America, and caused enormous damage, actually, to America's reputation, to American military's reputation, and so on. This image that came out overnight of this IDF soldier desecrating a statue of Jesus Christ, I don't think it's as bad as the Abu Ghraib images, which were truly appalling and involved a lot of people. But as a singular image, when you're trying to persuade a country like America, which is majority Christian, so has hundreds of millions of Christians living in it, when you're trying to persuade them of the validity of committing the American military to a war that was clearly being driven by Benjamin Netanyahu to promote Israel's interests, when you're trying to do that, hard to imagine a more damaging image to come out than the one we saw that came out overnight. Because it'll have hundreds of millions of Americans asking themselves, why are we fighting with these people?
Abu Ghraib destroyed American moral authority in Iraq and helped turn public opinion against that war. This Jesus icon incident could have similar consequences for Israel. Trump already faces pressure to end Middle East entanglements. Images like this make withdrawal politically easier.
And when you try and defend Israel on that basis of it being the only democracy, you then have a story like we saw last week, where the Knesset passes a new law where people that is the Israeli government, the authorities decide are Palestinian terrorists can be executed. But the same law doesn't apply to Israelis. And when I saw that, and I saw Ben-Gvir with his noose on his lapel of his suit and cracking the champagne open, and what is so clearly a two-tier form of justice that only applies to Palestinians, not to any Israelis who might commit acts of terrorism.
Two-tier justice systems are antithetical to democracy. When Israel passes laws allowing execution of Palestinian terrorists, but not Israeli ones, it admits to apartheid-style governance. Ben-Gvir's noose celebration was a gift to Israel's enemies, pure propaganda gold.
If you want to know my honest view, Ishai, Ben-Gvir, I think, is just as an appalling an extremist as the enemies you're trying to fight. And I think him and Smodrich
Has he murdered anybody?
are largely responsible. Hang on, let me finish. Are largely responsible for the dwindling support for Israel in America and around the world.
Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are Netanyahu's biggest liability because they say openly what he thinks privately. Their extremism makes it impossible for moderate Americans to support Israel while maintaining moral credibility. They're Israel's worst ambassadors.
And I would argue it is incumbent on decent Israelis to stand up against what is being done in their names by people like Smodrich and Ben-Gvir, who I think have made it crystal clear they want to kick all the Palestinians out of Gaza, they want to take back the West Bank, they want to do anything they think they can get away with. And at some point, decent Israelis have to stand up to these people and stop them doing it in their name. Or I can tell you, these polls about Israel's lack of popularity in America and around the world will get worse.
The point about decent Israelis is spot on. Netanyahu's coalition depends on these extremists, but they're destroying Israel's international legitimacy. With American support cratering, Israel faces a choice between maintaining this government or maintaining American alliance. They can't have both.